Hello, welcome to the latest webinar as part of Twinkle's English Mastery series. This webinar is going to be all about level testing and assessing our students' English level. Welcome if this is the very first webinar you've attended. All of this webinar series are free. We hold them once a month. After we record them, we will always add them to YouTube. So if you miss them or you want to rewatch, you can see them there. We will always offer certificates as part of this series. So if you wait to the end, you can find out how to get your certificate. And we nearly always give you a free guide at the end of the webinar. So let's get started. Level testing and assessment. So first I want you to think about if English is your second language, or if you've studied another second language, what level are you in that language? Are you a beginner? Are you pre-A1, very, very beginning? Are you kind of on your way, A2? Are you quite an intermediate language user? Are you advanced? Are you a native level speaker? What level are you in that language? And secondly, I want you to think about, how do you know that? How do you know what level are you? Are you just guessing based on your abilities? Are you basing it on what a teacher or a tutor has told you? Is it the score that Duolingo gives you as you've been studying on Duolingo? Is it from a formal examination? Is it part of your schooling? Is it the grade you were assessed as part of your formal education? How do you know that you are that level in that language? Think about how you know that, because that's going to be very relevant for today. So a couple of things we plan to cover in this webinar is, why do we test? Why do we want to test our students at all? And then we're going to cover top 3 tips for testing and assessment. We're going to talk about some suggested tests and assessments that you can use in the classroom. Then we're going to think about what is next. Okay, so I've tested my students. What do I do now? Then we're going to talk a little bit about the CEFR specifically, because it's quite a useful universal tool. And then we're going to talk about how we can align the CEFR to some local standards. I can't give you a standard for every country, unfortunately, but I'll cover quite a few, so hopefully that will be helpful to many of you. Okay, so first we're going to cover the history of English testing. Pre-1950s, testing was via translation. This is in line with the language teaching methods of the time. It was all about translating from one language into the other. There was no testing or assessment of your communicative abilities or your ability to understand and be understood in that language. And then after the 1950s, towards the 1970s, we have discrete point testing. At that point, people theorized that language could be broken down into blocks and tested via multiple choice exams. So you could ask questions about grammar in a multiple choice format. You could ask questions about vocabulary in a multiple choice format. So that became the standard for testing. That gave rise to the TOEFL in the US for international students, with a big focus on grammar, vocabulary, and listening. And also the Michigan test, which was a multiple choice standardized test. Towards the 80s and 90s, we had the communicative switch. And this is reflective of teaching practice for language as a whole, right? Teaching moved towards a more communicative, practical focus. Can you communicate in the language? How do you communicate with each other? And the tests begin to focus on, can you use it? IELTS began with a focus on face-to-face communication. So you were having conversations with a speaking examiner in order to test your speaking and communication abilities in English. From 2001, we saw the development of the CEFR. So that meant that some tests would also give you a kind of rough CEFR level. And those guidelines and blueprint were created. We'll talk more about that later. And then nowadays, it's really all about technology. So computer testing, we've seen the rise of the Duolingo English test over the past 4 years. We've seen the utilization of AI. Exams can now be taken via the internet, which means that a lot more people are able to take exams at a more convenient time for them. So the method of testing, the kind of test itself hasn't changed, but the ways in which we can test have changed a lot recently. So If you're watching this live, it's time for a breakout room. And I want you to think about, how do you currently test your students? What methods do you use? Do your students arrive in your classroom already assigned a level? Do they take an exam in order to join your school or your course? Do they have to complete some sort of formal examination? Are your students organised based on what grade they should be in the school curriculum? Is it just vibes? Do you just have a quick conversation with them? How do you currently know the level of your students? And then I also want you to talk about what works and what doesn't. So what works in terms of assessing your students and what doesn't. It might be that the tests are really effective in terms of delivering you a clear understanding of your students' abilities and their communication abilities, but it's quite stressful for the students and they have a lot of anxiety. Or do you perhaps feel that the exam isn't intimidating or scary, but it's not really delivering you the results you want? Or the exam is fine or the assessment is fine, but you're not really sure what to do with that information once you've collected it. So I'll give you time to go to your breakout rooms. This video will be paused. If you're watching this as a recording, just think for yourselves or discuss with a fellow co-worker, how do you test your students currently, what works and what doesn't. Give you time to pause, reflect and discuss. Okay, welcome back. Now we're going to discuss, why do we test? Firstly, to track progress. So we don't want to view a test as an indication of success or failure, but instead to provide us with a baseline by which to show future progress and understand better how to support our students. If we know where they are now, we can measure them in 6 months to a year and see how much they've progressed, see if their communicative ability has changed. So it's all about providing a baseline and understanding them more. Planning your lessons. So understanding where your students are at, you can understand what they need and how you can help them. If you can find their CEFR level, it's going to be very easy for you to find materials on a Twinkle website, or to order textbooks, or to find other resources and materials and to plan your lesson accordingly, right? You want to be giving them grammar points and vocabulary and situations that are level appropriate, not too boring, not too challenging, somewhere in the middle. But you can't do that unless you first know where they're currently at and what their current abilities are. Finally, identifying mixed levels. I know that a challenge that a lot of teachers face is mixed level classes, when you have a large class size and you have students from lots of different levels. First, you need to diagnose the problem, right? Clearly identifying where all your students are at and what the range of levels might be is going to make it a lot harder to manage. You might then have a conversation with your school director about the situation. Can it be changed? Can the class be divided? Can students be moved around? Or if that's not possible, it's going to help you to plan and figure out a plan of action accordingly. So 3 core reasons are to track progress, to plan our lessons, and to identify problems like mixed levels. So rethinking how we test. Have a look at some of these GIFs, these images, and see if you can think about what symptoms all of these are. Give you a second. So the first one is racing thoughts. Your mind is running, your thoughts are racing. This one is sleepless nights, insomnia. This one, sweaty hands, sweaty palms. Your heart is racing. You have nausea or stomach problems, or you can't breathe, you have shortness of breath. These are all common symptoms of lots of anxiety, but exam anxiety. If you've ever taken any sort of test, exam, you will have experienced these symptoms in the past, I'm sure, unless you're very cool and calm and not fazed by anything. How do you feel when you take a test? When you've taken a test or a job interview or an exam, any sort of assessment in the past, if your school director has watched your lessons, if you've had to take a teaching exam. How did you feel before that exam, during that exam, after that exam? Let's think about our feelings. And I'm sure all of the things that you've felt, your students have felt. And if they think or understand that they're in a testing situation and you're trying to test their abilities, then they will start to feel all of these symptoms and maybe more. Most of us want to assess our students' level, but if students experience anxiety when we're trying to assess their abilities, that can have some unintended consequences. Fear and anxiety can prevent us from learning and speaking a second language. If you've heard of Krashen's effective filter hypothesis or Fredrickson's broaden and build theory, that we need positive thoughts and positive experiences to learn, you'll know that our feelings and our emotions can play a big role in our abilities. And if students are very scared or nervous, they may not be able to show you their true abilities, especially when speaking in a language or their second language. It also creates negative feelings and emotions when speaking in English. If you've come to one of these webinars before, we talk a lot about how the journey for learning English is really long, right? So a lot of students start learning English at kindergarten these days. They start learning at kindergarten or elementary, primary school, and they have a long road with English ahead of them. That might be elementary school, middle school, high school, university, into their adult working life. They'll continue to study, practice, and speak in English. If we create negative emotions and feelings around English at the very beginning of that journey, we're not helping that student to have a positive and productive experience in their language learning roadmap, right? We want to ensure, especially when students are young, that their kind of mental connection with English is fun and positive. That's really important. And it can also be intimidating. This is a particular problem if you've got a student coming to you as a prospective student for the first time, if they're looking to join a class or they're about to join your school or academy. If the first thing we do is give them a level test and it's really scary and unpleasant, they might not want to join our school, they might not want to come back. So we want to have our first interactions with a student to be really positive and create a really nice initial atmosphere. So we don't want to scare them away with a very scary test. So how are we going to solve this? Let's try to reframe testing as something else. So when we're thinking in our own minds and we're talking to students, we're not going to call it a level test. We're going to call it an assessment or an estimation, a snapshot, an evaluation. But let's not call it an exam or a test. I'll try my best in the rest of this webinar to avoid the word test or exam as much as possible. So let's try to reframe it first in our minds as an assessment or a snapshot, not as an exam. My 3 top tips will be: keep it short. Ideally, no longer than 10 to 15 minutes. Usually, we don't need a really long exam to get an approximate level for a student, especially in a class setting. We are not getting a comprehensive view of their abilities right now. This is not the Cambridge English test. This is not IELTS. We don't want to know the minutiae of everything they know and they don't know. We want to gauge their general level, what they're capable of, what they're not capable of. So we want to keep it short, not too long, just to keep it quick and easy and not a negative experience. We want to make it fun. I know this seems a little bit contradictory, but we can make assessments and evaluations fun. They don't have to be a negative or boring or scary experience. A placement activity doesn't need to be a sit-down test. It can be games. It can be a conversation. Anything where you're getting a sense of their level and their ability to communicate in English, what their strengths are, and where do they need extra support. So we can make tests fun and engaging. They don't need to be boring and they don't need to be scary. Finally, make it practical. We don't want to go back to the old 1950s method of translation. We want to keep the focus on practical language ability rather than memorizing grammar and lists. Remember, grammar and vocab lists are a tool to get us to the ability to communicate, right? So that's what we want to be looking at. The goal should be to understand how well can they communicate, how well can you understand them, and how well can they understand you. So our suggestions, these are some of the activities and games that we have available on Twinkle that can help you to gauge your students' level. This is my favourite one. Like I said, level testing doesn't have to be boring. These are all leveling games that start from very beginner and become more advanced for you to test, for you to assess your students' level in a fun and engaging way. This one has a focus on conversation and communication. So it's a set of conversation cards organized by level. So you can start a beginner or you can jump in closer to where you think your student's level might be. You can ask them the questions, see how well they can respond and communicate, and move through the cards. When you get to a place where they aren't able to answer or confidently give you a response in English, that would be where you stop. You don't need to complete the whole set. If you get to A2 and your student is really struggling, there's no need to put them through the whole set of cards, right? We can stop there. Conversation cards, describe the picture. I like this one because, again, it's closer to a game. The focus is on communication and it's very light-hearted and straightforward. So you show them a picture, you ask them questions, there's question prompts within the presentation, and you can gauge their level. So we'll start with simple questions like what color is the item, how many people are in the room, where are they, and the questions will get harder as you move on. And again, you can stop whenever you feel like you've gotten the answer you need and you've got a sense of your students' abilities. There's no need to continue through the whole presentation if that's going to make them uncomfortable and you know that the higher levels are not appropriate. Spot the error. This one is quite good because it flips the script. So instead of us spotting errors in the students' abilities, they're spotting the error in the worksheet. So it's a presentation style, it's aligned to CEFR, it goes up to B2, and it allows students to spot the errors in the sentences to gauge where they're at and what their abilities are. Describe the picture. Again, this is similar to the previous one, but this is better suited to teenage students and includes photographs rather than illustrations if that's what you're after. And if you go to the Twinkle's website, you'll find more tests and assessments similar to these ones with a focus on fun and engagement rather than a sit-down test. So after testing, what's next? So like I said, you might find that you have mixed level classes. This is going to be really useful information to know at the beginning of a course or the beginning of the school year. We've developed some large class packs that are ideal for mixed level classes. So they include scaffolding, visual aids, leveled readers, sentence frames, extra support, and sometimes fast finisher activities or extension activities for your students that are slightly more advanced, to allow you to kind of manage the classroom and make sure you're supporting everyone adequately. Finding the right materials. So this is from the Twinkle ESL Hub. I hope you've all seen it before, but if you've not, this is the easiest way to find English language materials on the Twinkle website. Go to the English Language Hub, it will be linked at the end. You find your student's age group and then you can find the appropriate level organised according to CEFR, so pre-A1, A1, A2, B1, B2, etc. You can then dig into the different levels and find materials appropriate for your students. This makes it really quick and easy to find the right materials for your class after you've assessed them and you know where they're at. It's really important to choose the right materials because something that's too easy is going to be quite boring and lead to kind of slow progress. They're not progressing because they already know it's too easy for them. And materials that are too advanced can create quite a lot of frustration and reduce their confidence, right? If you show up to every lesson and everything is just beyond your ability, it's going to be really hard for you to feel confident and feel kind of enjoy your language learning process. Effective teaching often happens when students work slightly above their comfort zone with the support of their teacher. So you're within the level, working on vocabulary and grammar you might not have encountered, but not everything is new. There are some familiar words, some familiar concepts, so that we have a kind of foundation to build from. So the Twinkle website makes it really easy to do that. And also, if you've assessed your students' level, you can use this to find other non-Twinkle materials, should that be your preference. Helps you to find the right textbooks, the right videos, the right vocabulary for your lessons. Okay, so what is the CEFR? We talked a bit about it today, but I thought it would be helpful to just go into detail about what it is exactly. So the idea of developing the CEFR began in 1991. It was developed by the Council of Europe. It was published in 2001 and it was renewed in 2020. The CEFR reference is for European languages. It's an international standard, so it can be used not just for English, but for Spanish, French, Italian, etc. And it's used to describe language proficiency. It organizes language ability into 6 levels. So starting at A1 through to B1, B2, and then C. So A1 is your basic, very beginner. B1 and B2, you're an independent user. You can have conversations in the language, you can converse. And then C level is your advanced, very advanced, proficient, almost native level speaker. For ESL teachers, the CEFR provides a clear framework for understanding of what students can do at each stage. So the CEFR provides can-do statements for each level, so we can focus on what students can do. What are they able to do? Can they ask simple questions? Can they talk about what happened to them on the weekend? This kind of thing. And it focuses on practical communication and language output. So how does that align with some local standards, right? It's great to know a student's CEFR level for using international materials and finding lesson plans, but you also need to know that how does this align with where your students should be. I haven't got every country in here, like I said. If your country isn't in here, or I don't talk about your country, but you are interested, you can always contact us and I'll see what I can find for you. So in Japan, I know many of you are based in Japan, they've developed the CEFR-J. They felt that the CEFR was too broad for Japanese students, so each level contained quite a range of grammar and vocabulary and can-do statements. So they developed a more detailed, granular system, which breaks down the CEFR into 10 sub-levels. If you Google, you'll be able to find the CEFR-J and all of the different levels contained within it, but it's specific to Japanese students and their needs and challenges. In Korea, elementary school students will study English from pre-A1 to A1. Middle school students will try to get to an A2 level, and then high school grade is A2 up to a B2, depending on the type of high school your student might attend. In Spain, primary school focuses on A1 to A2. Compulsory secondary schools aim for a B1, and the high school baccalaureate also goes for a B1. Additionally, many universities in Spain also require you to achieve a foreign language ability. That might not be English, but they do expect students to achieve around a B1 or a B2 level in order to graduate. In Taiwan, junior school maps to A2 and senior high school maps to a B1, and university graduates are pushed to a B2, and that will be in English due to Taiwan's English bilingual policy. In Vietnam, the Ministry for Education has created 6 levels of foreign language proficiency called the VSTEP, and it's adapted from the CEFR. Primary school will be around A1, which is level 1, middle school is A2, and high school students try for a B1 level. I've looked into the new global success textbooks, and in my opinion, grade 1 to 2 are broadly pre-A1 to A1. I think I've seen somewhere that says it's all A1, but there's a lot of pre-A1 mixed in there and some pre-1, some A1 grammar concepts. So it's a bit of a mix. And then grade 3 to 5 is about A1 to A2. In Thailand, they have their own framework for English language teaching, and that's a direct localization, the CEFR. The Ministry of Education targets A1 for primary school, A2 for junior high, B1 for senior high, and B2 for university graduates. In Cambodia, they've integrated the CEFR into their national curriculum, into their GEP program. The public school focuses for primary school is very much pre-A1, A1, very basic. Secondary school, they focus on A2 into B1, and by the end of high school, they should be around B1. In Indonesia, they haven't officially kind of embedded CEFR into their levels, and so they have their own levels of phases. However, elementary is around A2 to B1, and then high school goes to a B2. And then finally in Turkey, elementary school is A1, middle school progresses through A2, and then high schools focus on B1 and B2. If students are at a specialized prep high school, they may be a slightly higher level, around a B2, moving into a C1. Okay, so all of that, but how can Twinkle help you in this journey to improving your assessments? Firstly, as I mentioned, we have ready-made level assessments, fun, no prep activities to gauge your students' level. Resources organised by age and CEFR so you can easily find the right materials for your students. Large class packs designed to support mixed level teaching. And localised materials. For example, our amazing Vietnam team have created materials aligned with the Global Success books so that you know exactly what your students should be studying and where they are within that framework. One thing I didn't mention is if you are interested in more formal assessment, we have a whole range of resources aligned to the Cambridge English exams that use a prep and practice model in order to help your students get ready for those exams. And we are about to embark on some IELTS resources, so you can also use Twinkle resources to prepare your students for the IELTS exams. Everything I've mentioned today is in our free assessment and level testing guide for teachers. If you follow the QR code, you should be able to easily download that. I won't give out slides for this presentation. What I will give is this free guide because it contains everything that you might need to know. Hopefully someone will also put the link in the chat so you can find it. And when you get your automated certificate, you should get a link to the guide also. And then finally, where can you find more from Twinkle ESL? We have these sessions every month. So we have free English mastery webinars happen every month. If you've signed up to this one, you've signed up to them all. You will get a message when the next one is organised. Our next webinar will be all about listening skills. And then the webinar in August is going to be all about phonics. You can see on screen our wonderful ESL hub. As I mentioned, this has everything you might need as an ESL teacher. Materials from kids, teens to adults. We have exam prep resources. We have our own curriculum, and we have some business English stuff too. There you can find that handy drop-down menu with all the levels and the ages, and you can find things like our blog, our CPD courses, our free guides. Everything that the Twinkle ESL team make is contained there. So don't forget to check the hub to find stuff that's useful to you. If you haven't already used Twinkle, we do offer in most places 30 days for free. So hop onto the website, join in. You can try everything free for 30 days and see how you like it. There's unlimited downloads, so you can download and try as much as you want, see how you like it, try some things out, borrow our assessments and see how they go. I will let everyone pause the video now so you can have a chat and ask some questions. But if you do have questions that can't be answered today, you can always reach out to me via email or via Twinkle's social media. Get in touch and ask me anything you might be interested in. Thank you, everybody. Bye.